So today I'd like to talk about what's something you read in the Bible, and quite often, if you're like me, you sort of go, scratch your head, you go, what does he mean by that? Okay, now, when Moses goes up the mountain, he sort of takes a bit of a hike up there, and he runs into the burning bush, and God has a bit of a yak to him and says, he says, well, let me introduce myself. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Why did he say that? I mean, to my thinking, I'm thinking, okay, I'm the God of Abraham. That would have done it, Or he could have said, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac. That's fair enough. That's right. But he had to say that. And I'm thinking, why did you say that? Now I'm left here, because wherever you're getting introduced after that, you're proclaiming to be the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. So why does he do it? That's the big question, isn't it? Right? So, and Abraham, what about Abraham? He's sort of like, okay, he's a guy that was selected out by God. Why? Is he a special dude or what? Well, have a look about what Abraham was a bit like and go to Isaiah 41. Isaiah 41, just one verse. And verse 8. It says, but you, Israel, are my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. So he specifically mentions it this way. Israel is his servant, Jacob, whom he has chosen, and these are the seed of Abraham, his friend. Now, what a title to get. I mean, wouldn't that be great, I'm John, the friend of God, But Abraham had that title, be the friend of God. I think that's absolutely amazing that you should get that title. And so, when you look at it, it's pretty amazing. And when you read the Bible about Abraham, a lot of you have got it wrong. True. You should actually open the Bible and read it for yourself. Okay. So, where did Abraham leave when he was told to go and inherit the land of Canaan? Anyone remember? No, he didn't. Haran. He'd gone with his father from Ur. At what point God spoke to him and told him to go up to Haran, which is in Turkey. So it's a nice little comfortable journey of about 1,600 miles. Right? So he goes for a nice walk there, and from Haran he goes down to take into the land of Canaan. That's another story. I'm sidetracking here. Okay, Genesis 18. A little bit more about Abraham than you might think. Genesis 18, verse 8. Now, this story, you look at this story and you sort of go, hang on a minute, this is a bit far-fetched. But don't forget, the Bible is based on truth. Okay, verse 8. And he, that's Abraham, he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it for them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. So, who's the three men that came there? What? Go on.
Oh, I thought you were asking the question.
Yeah, I'm asking the question.
Two angels? Jesus.
And exactly. The Creator himself standing here with a couple of angels. And yet, Abraham recognised, this is my God. Okay. And so they sat down and he ate. And in verse 9, and they said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. I said, okay, wife's in the tent, probably keeping out of the sun. Like a day like today. Right? And he said, I will certainly return unto you according to your time of life, and lo, Sarah your wife shall have a son, and Sarah heard it in the tent which was behind him. And Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of woman. So in other words, she's gone through that phase and can't have kids anymore. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, and by the way, she hasn't had any children, right? Laughed within herself and says, I am waxed old. Shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, of a surety bear a child, which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? And at the time appointed, I will return unto you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. So how old is Sarah now at this stage? No? 89. Right? Because it was nearly 100 when Abraham became a father. So it's pretty good, and there was 10 years difference. So, it's pretty good, isn't it? Have a child at 90? I guarantee the ladies here would not want to have children at 90. Well, not too many. Anyway. And is anything too hard for the Lord appointed? And so that came to pass. And she's going to have a son. And we all know that that did happen. But can you imagine if you sort of like go out camping and you're living in a tent and along comes God, sits down and says, make us something to eat. You know? Pretty good. You'd be falling over yourself trying to figure out what you're going to feed God. But I'm sure that could be provided. But the interesting thing is that sort of the amazing thing is that God recognised Abraham and said, well, I'm going to come and have a meal with you. You know? And what did he say? I mean, before he went to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, he said to him, I know what you're like, Abraham, and I know that you'll keep my words in charge for your children as well. I mean, when we think about it, we brought our children up the best we could, but did we read them the scriptures all the time? I'm talking about older folk like me, but I'm certain I could say I missed out a bit on that. Okay. So, Abraham, the friend of God, and here he is having a conversation with God. That's the relationship Abraham had with him. Okay, just look over the page to Genesis 21. And the Lord visited, verse 1, visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he'd spoken. And Sarah conceived and bare Abram a son in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare unto him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, have you worked that one out? No. When did the covenant of circumcision come in? At Isaac, right? When Isaac was 8 days old, he circumcised him and Ishmael. But anyway, that's another story. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him, because Sarah was 90 or 10 years younger. And Sarah said, God has made me to laugh, so all that will hear me laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah should have given suck, for I have borne him a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham had a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. Right? And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne Abraham, mocking. So here's the interesting. Here's the firstborn, right? Which, what's his name? Ishmael. He's mocking. He's mocking the young boy, right? Don't do that. This young boy is the fulfillment of a promise that God made to Abraham and Sarah. Okay. And so what happened is a particular verse here. I want you to understand this. Wherefore, she said to Abraham, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac." And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. Right? And God said to Abraham, "Let it not be grievous in your sight because of the lad, because of the bondwoman, and all that Sarah has said unto you, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall your seed be called. And also the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he," that's Ishmael, "is your seed." Abraham rose up early in the morning, took bread and a bottle of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on his shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Okay, so that's that part of the story. Now, if you would have taken inheritance, if you read from the scriptures, normally it would come to the firstborn. But what did God say? In Isaac, your seed shall be called. So now, there's the fulfillment of what God was trying to get at. Right? I'm the God of Abraham. There's the first one. And then Isaac. Okay? So you can understand why the name Isaac is put there, because it, by ordinary reckoning, should be Ishmael. In fact, that statement there, right? Go over to Galatians 4. And it kind of explains what it's all about. I know it's easy to push a button up there. I like flicking through pages. Galatians, where are you there? Chapter 4. Verse 21. And so there's a bit of a debate, or a bit of a explanation, you might call it, something that was going on in the Galatian church. Okay, verse 21 of Galatians 4. "Tell me that you desire to be under the law. Do you not hear the law?" So the Galatian church, which of course knew nothing of Scripture because they were a Gentile nation, right? Now someone had come into the Galatian church, as it says earlier on, when Paul has a go at him, he said, "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Did you receive the Spirit by faith or by the law?" Right? And so he's given the two distinct examples. So now, from the Old Testament, they're laying out the examples. It is written, Abraham had two sons, one by the bondmaid, Ishmael, that's the son, and the other by a free woman, Sarah, whose son was Isaac. Okay. But he who was born after the bondwoman was born after the flesh. But he of the free woman was by promise. When God intervened and saw Abraham and Sarah was listening in the tent, the promise was made to Sarah, "You're going to have a son this time next year." Okay. So that was the promise of God. But the other boy, he was just born through natural circumstances to a slave. Okay? So now God says, this illustration here to show you, as it says there, okay. Verse 24, "Which things are an allegory? For these are the two covenants, one from Mount Sinai, which genders to bondage, which is Hagar." She's the one that had Ishmael. "For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and now answers to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children." Israel might be the descendants of the chosen people of God, but they are now in bondage. They're all natural people. "But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all." The ones who are free are the ones born of the Spirit of God. But I'll get to that in a minute. "For it is written, Rejoice, ye barren that bear not, break forth and cry that you travail not, for the desolate has many more children than she which has a husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of the promise." So you and I are counted as the same as Isaac, children of Abraham, or children of the promise. Okay? But then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit, even so it is now. Guess where your persecution comes from? Natural people. Okay. Nevertheless, what says the Scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are children of the bondwoman. We are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free. So, can you get that? That's why this is brought out in Galatians, to try and make you understand the message that was there when Isaac was pointed out to be, that's the descendant. I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac. Now Jacob. We'll get through to Jacob. Okay. Did I go Genesis 22? I'll see if I don't think I've done that. Here we are. Okay. Verse 1. It came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. And he said, Take now your son, your only son Isaac. So now it's Isaac's turn. He's grown up a bit. Whom you love, and get you to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell you. Okay. So what's wrong with that comment? What's wrong with it? God says something to Abraham that he has to go and sacrifice his son. Yet the promise was not only was he going to have a son, but you read back further on the promises, is that he was going to be part of the inheritance from Abraham, and his descendants would run into the millions. Well, how can you make a dead man be the author or the person that will be the forerunner, like Abraham, of millions? It kind of does not make sense. But to Abraham, he had it worked out. Because as you go through, you can see Abraham understands this. So, verse 3, Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. Abraham said to his young men, Abide here with the ass, I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. He knew he had to come back with him. God said, okay, go and sacrifice him. But Abraham knew, no, we're both going to come back down the mountain. The only way, of course, in Abraham's thinking is that God had to raise him from the dead. But there was really only one in the scriptures that God was going to raise from the dead, and that was Jesus Christ. So he, in type of a figure, Isaac, is Jesus Christ. And what I mean by that is that he went up to this mountain to get killed. Who carried the wood? He did. Who was going to make sure that the father was going to kill him? Abraham. And so the whole thing is actually setting the scene to try and make you understand in the future that the son of the father had to be sacrificed as a sacrifice to God, because God required the sacrifice. And so you know the story, how it all fits together. Okay, so now you've got the picture, Abraham, Isaac, and you can understand that, why not Ishmael. Then comes the next one. And where am I? Genesis 25. Verse 29. Two boys. Isaac's children, 2 boys. It says one was called Esau and one was called Jacob. Okay? So we know God's going to reject Esau, but why? Right? Okay, verse 31, 25, 31, yeah. Jacob said, "Sell me this day your birthright." Now, it all depends on how much value you place on this. Right? Now, the firstborn was Esau. You remember Jacob come out next, right? Even though they were twins, right? So he had the rights. He had the rights to be the next one in line as the descendant of Abraham. Okay? But that's not going to happen, right? Because first of all, Esau sells out his birthright. So if you value your birthright that low that you're going to sell it out for a small meal, do you think God's going to bless you for that? No. So you think about it, right? So when it came to the point where Jacob actually stole, remember, I was going to read the whole lot, but I won't go too long. You know, when Jacob goes in and he dresses up as his brother and he puts skins on his hands and around his neck and sort of tries to smell the same as his brother, and Dad couldn't see very well, was going pretty old age and a bit blind, and he gives him the blessing. And in that blessing, where was it? I think it's 27, but anyway, I'll get to it in a sec. In that blessing, basically, Esau doesn't get much. I'll have a look at it. Where was it? 20. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Genesis 27. And he says, and Jacob did this. Verse 22. Jacob went near to Isaac his father and felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he discerned him not because his hands were hairy. He put the skins of goats on there, as his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. And he said, "Are you my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." And so his father gives him the blessing. It says, and what does it say? Verse 28, "Therefore God will give you the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Let be Lord over your brethren." All right, Esau wouldn't like that one. "Let your mother's curse bow down to you. Cursed be everyone that curses you, and blessed be everyone that blesses you." And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came from hunting. So now we get to the point where, Dad realises what's happened. Okay, now you think about it. What Jacob had done is, all right, he put to the test the value of the birthright to Esau, and Esau lost. It was his choice. Right? And you might think, well, like Conan the dad with a smelly arm and all that sort of thing, surely that shouldn't count. Guess what? Esau lost the birthright the moment he took the meal instead of the blessing. Right? Otherwise you think, well, that can't be right. But hang on. God's statement to Moses was, "I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." So God honoured that blessing, right? So that came through. God didn't say, no, that was wrong, Jacob. What you did was wrong. He could have said, "I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau," but he didn't, because Esau sold out his birthright. So when you sort of look at that, you think, okay, I can understand now why God puts it in specifically. And he wants you to understand from that message, just 3 simple names, why it happened. And where do you fit in this? Right? Where do you fit in this? So when you think about it, what he wants to see in you is the attributes in your spirit like Isaac and like Jacob. Right? So, but the interesting thing is that you think about this, and Esau what he did is he decided, as soon as Dad passes away, I'm going to kill my brother. And Mum was awake up to this, and she ticked him off over to where she came from, Laban the Syrian, over in Syria. So he goes off at the end. You know the story. He finished up, he wanted a wife and finished up with 4, and then maybe a couple of kids, and he finished up with 12 boys, you know. So when you think about it, that's pretty good. But when he came back to the land, God said to him, go back to the land now, come back to the land, and he had to face Esau. Now, at the time when he left, okay, Esau his temper was on the boil, right? And so Jacob goes off to this other land. He finished up with everything, and he comes back to the land, and he's got so many herds, so many cattle, sheep, and all this sort of stuff. And yet the inheritance that was supposed to be his, because Esau sold out the birthright, Esau still got. In the sense that he got in the land, he got the blessing, he inherited the father's sheep, the cattle, everything else like that. So he got the natural side of what he wanted. That's why he never killed or tried to kill his brother, is because the brother came back and he's going, what's all these kids? What's all these animals? And even Jacob was trying to give him portions of it to say, I want to bless you, brother, you know, but the whole thing, it showed up how short-sighted Esau was and how much Jacob was worthy of the inheritance that he saw, because he finished up that way. And what do I want to have a look at now? 32. 32. Right. Oh, this is the point where they came to meet Esau. 32 verse 22. And he rose up at night and took his 2 wives, his 2 woman servants, that's his, don't know how you look at that, but anyway, and his 11 sons, finished up 12, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. Right? And Jacob was left alone. So don't forget, his family and his cattle and his sheep, they've gone over the other side of this brook or small river. Okay? And he was left alone. Can you see that? There's no one else but him. Now, all of a sudden, there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Where did this guy come from? All of a sudden, there was no one there, and all of a sudden there's a man that has a wrestle with Jacob. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. Now, that would be painful. In other words, you knock your thigh joint out, you try walking on it, or doing anything, very painful. Right? A lot of the ladies that have had hip replacements would know what that feels like. But so that hurt. Right? And he says, let me go, for the day breaks. And he said, I will not let you go except you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel. Okay? And he said, for as a prince you have power with God and with men, and have prevailed. And Jacob asked and said, tell me, I pray, what's your name? And he said, what do you ask me my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And he passed over Peniel, and the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. So you think, okay, here's this particular point where his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. God had a specific purpose for this. So Israel became the father of the children of Israel. Okay? That was the whole thing there, Israel. And so Abraham's name was changed from Abram to Abraham, and so on. And you go through that, all through scriptures about that. That's not what I was going to get at. Anyway, Hebrews 12. So, when you read Hebrews 11, it's all about the Old Testament people of faith, isn't it? And so Hebrews 12 is basically saying, come on, pick up your socks, right? So he's saying, okay, you're going to go through times that are hard. You look at these people that went through those times in the Old Testament, some of them were pretty hard, right? And he says, verse 11, now no chastening for the present seems to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to them which are exercised thereby. Wherefore, lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees. What's he saying? All right, you're going through a few troubles, right? You don't have to go around like that, right? Lift up the feeble knees and the hands, rejoice, because your name is written in heaven. Okay? Make straight paths for your feet, exactly what the Lord has been saying all through the scriptures, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but rather let it be healed. Follow peace with all men, and holiness with which no man shall see the Lord. So, you've got to follow after this. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springs up to trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. So, what are you going to do to yourself to hurt yourself? Let a root of bitterness get in there. Oh, that person did this and this and this to me. Oh, you're on your bad ways. Now he gives an example of what not to be like. This is why he missed out on his inheritance. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. That's the condemnation of Esau. That's why you won't even have him as a next door neighbour in heaven. Okay, for you know that afterwards, when he would have inherited the blessing, in other words, he had a chance at it, he had a good chance at it, and he wanted to it, he was rejected. Okay? For he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. So when you consider that, you the whole thing about Esau is actually explained a bit more in the New Testament, more so than the Old Testament. Okay. Revelation 2. Verse 17 or 16. Because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich and increased with goods and have need. Am I at the right place? No, 2. Revelation 2:17. Not 3 yet. 2:17. Yeah. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says unto the churches. To him that overcomes will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knows, save he that receives it. In other words, you're going to get a brand new name, right? What did the people of the Old Testament? Some of them did. The very faithful people, they got a new name, didn't they? Okay. So that's fine. 3:12. What do I want to see about this one? To him that overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. He shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which comes down from out of heaven from God, from my God. I will write upon him my new name. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says unto the churches. So there's everything you know and understand now, it's all going to change, even your name. Everything's going to change. You know, we're coming up to a point where we can look around at the world and we can see pretty clearly, if you have a good look at it, that Jesus is not far off. Okay? But in this, when the Lord appears in the sky, you know that the men go up to meet the Lord first and the ladies follow about half an hour later? Really? Do you know that? I'll show you. Revelation chapter 8. Chapter 8? I know you're going to throw rocks at me now, particularly the ladies. I'm only joking. Never mind. I thought I'd try a little bit of a funny side of things. Oh, well, communion time now.